which is such an important topic, which is really evident from the audience which are seen in the hall right now, in spite of being 4:30. Most common findings that we see on ultrasound findings are an echogenic focus, the single umbilical artery, renal pelvic atelectasis, choroid plexus, and it becomes difficult for us to counsel our patients because they are very anxious and they feel that this is an anomaly. So to moderate the sessions, can I have Dr. Vandana Bansal, madam? Madam is the president of Society of Fetal Medicine, Mumbai. I am not introducing her completely because that has been done in the previous session. Our other moderator, Dr. Sumit Chamaria, he has done his fellowship on fetal medicine from Medican Systems under Dr. Suresh, and he has received the Best Paper Presentation Award at CUSP in 2016 and 18. Our panelists for today, there's a long list. We have Dr. Megha Kamlapurkar, madam. She has been in obstetric practice since the last 20 years, practicing fetal medicine. She's also the founder president of ISOPAP Kalaburgi chapter. Dr. Saket Thakar is a fetal medicine and intervention specialist practicing in Pune. He is a proud alumni of Amrita Institute of Medical Sciences. Dr. Shetal Mehta, she is an ex-assistant professor from Department of OBGY KM Hospital. She also holds a fellowship in fetal medicine. She is a research fellowship she has received from the Department of Fetal Medicine of Mount Sinai Hospital and Department of Thoracic Surgery. Dr. Pooja Pable, she is a fetal medicine consultant at KM Hospital and at Umang IVF Center and Cloud9 Hospital. Dr. Raviraj Konkar, sir. He is a former associate professor of Department of OBGY RCSM Government Medical College and CPR Hospital, Kolhapur. Dr. Omkar Poddar, sir. He is a fetal medicine expert at Ansh Fetal Medicine Center, Sangli. He has been awarded the first prize for the best scientific paper at Shirin Mehta competition in Mumbai 2014. Dr. Manoj Jadhav, sir. Is he around?
Manoj.
He holds a fellowship in fetal medicine from Advanced Center for Fetal Care, Bangalore, and currently is practicing at Barshi. Dr. Ankur Shah is a director and fetal medicine consultant at Inside Fetal Medicine Center, Malegaon. Dr. Vaibhav Meru, sir. He is a director and consultant radiologist at Prism Medical, which is the only NABH accredited radiodiagnostic center in Solapur. And Dr. Dhyandev Chopde, sir. He is a director of Genetic Health and Research Center, Nashik, Maharashtra. You can see the number of people on the stage because we want all their expertise for such common topics that we come across in our everyday lives. And this being such an important session, we wanted to give you a take-home message to remember for lifelong from this conference. So let's start with the panel discussion.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. So I think it is for the first time in Solapur that we have 12 fetal medicine people on stage for the first time in Solapur. So very happy and thankful to Milind Shah sir and Monica madam for this conference. And the reason why we have chosen this topic is because this is something which we face every single day. As an obstetrician, almost every day we have a report wherein we have either a CP cyst or the echogenic focus or something else, or the else coming up. and we really are in a fix how to go about in today's world where we have so many options. So how we are going to deal with this is that madam is going to take us through few cases, and I'm going to tell in detail about how to go about with these markers when we find them isolated. So over to you, ma'am. We will discuss the cases.
So very good afternoon. We still have audience because this is a very important topic and it needs to be covered. And as you've taken a very good panel for the last, and so we thought we'll take some cases, some which have isolated and some where there is a problem. And we have a very beautiful team of fetal medicine. We have a geneticist, we have an obstetrician also on board. So with the era of combined first trimester screening, which picks up about 95% of Down syndrome, and the quadruple test, which again picks up about 82%, and the NIPT, which picks up almost 99% of Down syndrome. Maybe I can start with Ravi Raj. In the era of this first trimester screening and NIPT, is there even a relevance of doing these soft markers?
Yeah, definitely. Soft markers will increase the probability, means they have their own likelihood ratios. With that, we can at least we can suspect having aneuploidies in such cases.
So that means it's not that we've done a aneuploidy screening and all good, and we can just tell the patient that everything is good. We still need to do a genetic sonogram where we look at soft markers and we look at malformation, and this should be independent of whatever the screening is being done. Once you have done the screening, we look at the markers and then we may interpret them. So first is no MTP for the reason of soft markers, because they are just normal variations. They are detected in normal fetuses. There may be a little higher incidence of aneuploidies. They will resolve and unlikely to be of much clinical significance, but we will go with every case that we go on with. So there was a huge meta-analysis of second trimester soft markers, and each marker was given a likelihood ratio, a positive likelihood ratio and a negative likelihood ratio. So the final likelihood ratio is this. So among all of them, ventriculomegaly, increased nuchal fold, ARSA, and absent nasal bone are the significant ones, while the other ones have got less likelihood ratio. And that is, I would call them as mild soft markers and the strong soft markers. So there is a likelihood ratio that is there with each of them. So when I see a soft marker, what else do I want to do, Pooja? Any soft marker on an anomaly scan?
When I see any soft marker on anomaly scan, I have to make sure that it is isolated by detailed fetal anatomical evaluation, whether she has done first trimester screening for images of first trimester scan, whether it was standardized or not.
So you will look at your aneuploidy screening, you look at the age, and you look at the soft marker and what the likelihood ratio is. So we'll start with the first case, and Vaibhav, no? Yeah, Vaibhav. Manoj. Sorry. So Manoj, I have a case. She's a primary gravida, 32 years old, and this is her quadruple risk, 1 in 3,998, low risk. So she has got an intracardiac echogenic focus. Actually not one, there are 2 echogenic focuses. So will you want it to be reported, not reported, because you have a screen which is low risk, and how will you calculate the risk?
Ma'am, any scientific evidence, if we get on scan, we have to report it. Whether it is isolated or whether it is associated with other abnormality, we have to mention it. Suppose you have done the scan, you feel that it is not significant. If someone has reported, for some other reason, patient went to another doctor, and they scan and they find the EIF, and they said that you have missed it. So for that reason, you have to mention if you see the EIF. And as you said, ma'am, she is a 32-year primary and the low risk. I would not go for any invasive testing because it is screen negative. And as far as EIF is concerned, because she is 32-year, I would advise for fetal echo.
So is there a calculation that we do with this likelihood ratio when we look at
because,
the marker?
The likelihood ratio of EIF is 1. So it will not alter your risk. So it will risk remain the same.
Yes. So that is what, if it is, her a priori risk was around 1 in 4,000 and the likelihood ratio is less than 1. So you multiply 1 in 4,000 with 1 and it is going to be same. So your intracardiac echogenic focus is not going to change the aneuploidy risk.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. But you will report it, 1 or 2 or many, doesn't matter. Okay.
risk
So,
remains same.
so will you do a echo for them?
Ma'am, ideally, if it is done by the fetal minimum expert and the anomaly scan, I would not say not necessary. But if someone is beginner or new, then it is better to do because many times in the past, like we used to give a lot of importance to the EIF. Nowadays, we don't see is just a variation, neglect it. But it is a sometimes hint to your cardiac abnormalities. So you have to look for the pulmonary veins. You have to look for some small VSDs. So I would recommend for fetal echo.
So basically you are saying there should be a good cardiac evaluation.
Yes, ma'am.
Whether it is an echo or whether it is being done by a fetal medicine specialist
Yes.
who's looked at everything is good enough. So yes, we will do a cardiac assessment which needs to be done, but I think we will not put in a needle and we
No.
will not do any more tests over and above this. Are all the fetal medicine people with us on that? So geneticist has some other opinion? Yes. So we just said that everything is good and well, fine, nothing to be done. And there was then next day one patient has come with 2 echogenic focus now. And this is a cardiac evaluation being done. So maybe Omkar can take it from here. And we are seeing a small pulmonary artery. There is an overriding of aorta. There is a Fallot's tetralogy. So we just said echogenic focus, nothing to do. But has it changed our
Prognosis has changed definitely, because tetralogy of Fallot is a major cardiac abnormality which needs postnatal correction. So as madam said, that detailed cardiac evaluation, if already done, then no need, but sometimes these smaller VSDs can be missed. So a dedicated fetal echo is always better.
So now that she has a Fallot's tetralogy, it doesn't fit into only looking at intracardiac echogenic focus. The diagnosis now is a Fallot's and we would want to look at 22q deletion and we'll want to do an amniocentesis. So geneticist, sir, are you now happy that we do an amniocentesis? What do we want to send for in this?
Yeah, absolutely. In this case, not only about the 22q deletion, it could be any other aneuploidy also. So you would recommend karyotyping plus this 22q deletion specific.
So we have a microarray now. So
Yes.
will microarray be able to pick
that will
both
do.
of them?
Perfect.
So you will do an amniocentesis now for this?
Yes madam, but preferably microarray then karyotype.
So this one had a 22q deletion and the father also had a 22q deletion. So how do we explain to the parents about the recurrence?
Mostly this 22q11 deletion or Dijk's syndrome, in 80% of cases it's the de novo mutation. But in around 20% the father is also the carrier of same. So it's an autosomal dominant with 50% recurrence risk.
So we started off with an echogenic focus and then the cardiac showed some abnormality and then we have a 50% recurrence that we have seen. So you just don't leave intracardiac echogenic focus, but yes, if it is isolated, no cardiac abnormalities, we can just reassure the patient.
Okay, so what the most common question what we get from the patients once they come to us with the report is, what exactly does my baby have? What is in the heart? Some say there is dot, ek pandra dot ahe. So what exactly is an echogenic focus? How do we define it? How do we make a differentiation of it from the rhabdomyoma thing? So definition is it's a small, and the size what has been given in the literature is that it's a small echogenic area which is less than 6 millimeters in size, and it can be in either of the ventricle of the heart, which is as bright as the surrounding bone. And what exactly it is, it's a microcalcification of the papillary muscle of the heart, and can be single, can be multiple, can be in one or both the ventricles of the heart. And as we just discussed, EIF are identified in almost up to 25% of the women in Asian population. So if we do around 20 scans in a day, almost 5 of them are going to have echogenic intracardiac focus in them. So just a good counseling should suffice if a previous scan has been done. So yes, again going through a few of the images. The first one, what we see is a normal 4-chamber view where we can see the 2 atria, the ventricles, and in the second one here, marker hai ka? Excuse me, but the pointer. So here in the second one, we can see an echogenic focus in the left ventricle of the heart. Why is this the left ventricle? We can see the pulmonary vein. This is the spine, so left atrium, left ventricle, and there is a single echogenic focus over here. In the third one, we can see echogenic focus in both the ventricles, and wherein in the last image we have two foci in the same left ventricle of the heart. So either one or two or multiple, that doesn't matter. So coming to the main question, when we see an echogenic focus on a target scan and when it is isolated, very important is isolated, what to do next? So for the patients who have undergone a first trimester combined screening test or any aneuploidy screening test, and there is an isolated echogenic focus, there is no need for the fetal echocardiography. Yes, if the good cardiac evaluation has been done. No need to follow up on ultrasound imaging for the echogenic focus because it doesn't increase in size. No need for any invasive testing, as Dr. Manoj has said. There is no need for the invasive testing like amnio solely for this indication. No need for postnatal evaluation of the baby, so there is no need of neonatal echo. And EIF is not associated with cardiac malformation in the fetus or newborns. So meta-analysis from 2013 has demonstrated lack of any association between the EIF and trisomy 21 with a positive likelihood ratio of 0.95.
Can I add something?
Yes, please.
Just to add here is that all echogenic focus, I mean, if the combined screening is low risk, the cardiac evaluation has been done by a good radiologist or a fetal medicine consultant, and suppose we skip the echo. Very rarely, in 1 or 2% of cases, sometimes these echogenic focus can become big and turn up into an abdominoma. Very rarely, but it should not happen like patient has been scanned at 20 weeks and again directly scan has been done at 32 weeks. So in between, scan should be advised or follow-up should be advised. Not echo as such, but just a follow-up. So very rarely it happens, but we should have a look again.
Yes. So moving on to our second marker.
So we have taken some frequent ones first and then we'll go on to the not so frequent. So choroid plexus cyst, and for that, Ankur, do we act on an isolated CP cyst? Does number matter, the size, right side, left side?
Yeah, actually the size matters, because if the size is like more than 1 centimeter, then it can be a marker for trisomy 18. So we have to look for any other structural anomalies seen in the fetus or not. If no other structural anomalies is seen, the size is a smaller size, then no need to act upon further. We can just say it's an isolated CP cyst and its prognosis is good.
So basically choroid plexus cyst, if it is present, we have to look for other markers. So that is the most important thing. Choroid plexus itself is not so important. It is present in about 4% of normal fetuses, whether unilateral, bilateral, small, big, multiple, doesn't matter much. It is just all of them will regress by 24 weeks of gestation. But the main point is, if you have a choroid plexus, look at the rest of the baby. Just don't send them off saying, okay, CP cyst to normal hai. And on the other side, not scare the patient also for a CP cyst. So we have this case. She was called on phone to me saying, low risk FTS hai, 22-year primary gravida hai, only CP cyst hai. Madam, kya karna hai? So I said, I want to see the baby. So Shetal, you can take this. Isolated CP cyst, is it really isolated? How do you define isolated?
So typically CP cyst has got a stronger association with trisomy 18, rarely 21. So your checklist has to be a little wider. Trisomy 18 will have other structural abnormalities. So before I say isolated, we look at various things. We look at the growth. Rarely will trisomy 18 be with normal growth. We look at the head shape. Definitely one of the very few places where we will definitely document open hands in cases. Normally open hands or counting fingers is not part of a routine anomaly scan, but the moment I see a CP cyst, I will not let the patient go away till I've seen open hands, because clenched fist is a strong marker. Some of these things could be very subtle if you've not paid attention to it. And we might not realize clenched hands and we might miss. So trisomy 18, sometimes we look at the heart in detail. Sometimes there could just be a small VSD. So you need to do a thorough job of really looking head to toe. Like this baby has a lot of things. I see a cleft lip, palate, there's clenched fist. So when we call it isolated, the onus is on us to really be sure that it is isolated and that we've seen everything, because that completely changes the scenario then.
So that is the gist of this, that although they said isolated, there was a clenched hand, very subtle cleft lip, there was a shape which was strawberry shape, and there was an FGR. So if you have a early onset IUGR with all these markers, our diagnosis is going to change now. So will you do a quadruple marker or an NIPT, or what will you do for this patient now?
Amniocentesis directly, because I need to prove that it is not. I mean, it is.
So no NIPT, no other screening test to do
for
further.
Structural abnormalities on scan, there is no role for screening.
So we started off saying CP cyst is very innocuous and doesn't have much problems, and if the screening is all right, the likelihood ratio not too much. But if that is only for isolated, so you need to look at the baby very carefully. And here, yes, no NIPT, it has to be an amniocentesis. And as what Shetal said, it is fish was trisomy 18 and the karyotype also. Sir, anything else you would want to do in this?
In this case, as Dr. Sital said, directly we will be going for the amniocentesis to check for chromosome abnormalities. Because even with isolated choroid plexus cyst, the risk is around 1 to 3% for trisomy 18. And we consider the cutoff value as 1 in 100 in the screening procedures. So instead of going for the screening procedures, directly we'll go for the amniocentesis and confirm it.
And sir, here if you see the karyotype is showing a 13-18 translocation and 1+18. So there was a translocation. So the recurrence risk is going to be higher in this case for all her pregnancies further. So for CP cyst, when you have one, look for all other soft markers, look for other malformation, look for IUGR also in these cases, and alone it may not modify the risk, and maybe you may not do anything. So while I said that, the next day one doctor, 35-year-old, has come to me. She has a unilateral CP cyst only, nothing else. Even I have seen and nothing else was there. But she had a quadruple and a dual marker, both intermediate risk. So first is, she's done a dual marker, and then she's done this CP cyst, and then she's done a quadruple marker. So, Saket, sorry. Do we do double test? Will it tell us double information? 2 screening tests.
No, I mean, if she's intermediate risk in the dual marker, doing a quadruple is not really what we look at. Either we directly give her a NIPT option, which will give us much more idea about trisomy 21, which we are most bothered about when it's an intermediate risk, because isolated CPC otherwise is a very weak marker for trisomy 21. So the intermediate dual marker is most likely a false positive one. So a non-invasive screening may be offered to her. But if they're really keen on doing a confirmatory test, and if she's too advanced in the pregnancy, we can always offer them an invasive and just clear the doubt.
So I also told her, oh, it is just you've done 2 wrong tests and CP cyst is unilateral, nothing else. The growth is normal, you can see. We'll just do an NIPT. She said she wanted an amniocentesis, and it came out as trisomy 21. We just said choroid plexus is associated with 18 and not with 21, but I think that intermediate risk was what must have been the cause. Sir, any
Yes, it is also associated with trisomy 21, though the risk is low, it is associated, it is not to be associated. So risk is said to be 1% with isolated CPCL for trisomy 21.
So this is not isolated. It is choroid plexus with a dual marker and quadruple marker positive.
In that case,
so
definitely
again,
it
this can't
increases.
be called as an isolated. No,
Yeah.
it is a risk which is high.
So coming to the choroid plexus cyst, what exactly these choroid plexus cysts are? These are the small fluid-filled structures within the choroid of the lateral ventricles of the brain, and usually they are less than 10 millimeters in size, and they are of course seen in up to 1 to 2% of the euploid fetuses in second trimester as an isolated finding, and CPCs are seen in up to 30 to 50% of the fetuses with trisomy 18. And hence a detailed anatomical evaluation, as Dr. Shetal has enlightened us, that it's very important to see for the subtle things. We should know what exactly to be seen, what are the markers of trisomy 18 on scan, so that we can see those things, make a checklist of those things that I have to see the clenched fist or the open hands I have to see for the head well, the CSP, the corpus callosum, for the growth graph and for the growth percentiles and all, and hence a detailed anatomical evaluation at target scan becomes of utmost importance. And as Sir said, presence of CPCs in an isolated fashion doesn't alter the risk of trisomy 21 significantly, although up to the tune of 1% to 2%. So here in the first image we have a normal lateral ventricle. We can see the far field lateral ventricle beautifully with a CSP, and in the second image there is a unilateral CP cyst, and in the third one we have the bilateral choroid plexus cyst. Now, again the same question, CP cyst on target scan, if isolated, what next to be done? So as we discussed, CP cyst can be seen up to 1 to 2% of the euploid fetuses, the normal, the chromosomally normal fetuses in the second trimester. If isolated, then reassurance of the couple is recommended if they have undergone the first trimester screening test. CP cysts regress spontaneously in almost 99% of the cases by 28 weeks. So this point has to be put forth in front of the couple. And another important point is that postnatal neurocognition or motor function or behavior of these fetuses is absolutely normal, because brain, anything related to the brain or of the heart, patients are scared the most. So we should give them an extra minute and explain these 2-3 points in detail so that they are not scared.
Sir, again, to conclude this, discussing CP cyst among us has happened now, but to convey this to the patient is very important in their language. Because what commonly we come to know from the patient that डॉक्टर डोक्यामध्ये बाळाच्या मेंदूत गाठ आहे, तर ही गाठ नाही आहे, इट इज जस्ट अ पाण्याचा बबल और पाण्याचा बुडबुडा. This word should be used while counseling, which is very important to convey what exactly the finding is in the scan. The moment you say मेंदूची गाठ आहे, डोक्यामध्ये गाठ आहे, they definitely go and terminate, even if it is isolated or low risk on double marker, whatever you say. So that is the request to all the obstetricians, that it's just a simple water bubble or a पाण्याचा बुडबुडा in their easy language that we have to convey them. Thank you.
If they are too
I would
much
just
conscious,
like to
then
make one
follow-up
point.
scan.
Yeah. So, choroid plexus cyst, yes, is a very easily diagnosable finding, but a very common finding which is reported as a choroid plexus cyst is the ganglionic eminence cavitation. Only the location is different. Ganglionic eminence cavitation will be anterior to the foramen of Monro, and choroid plexus cyst will be posterior to the foramen of Monro. And ganglionic eminence cavitation has a completely different prognosis as compared to a CPC. The prognosis is may be very grave in those cases. So it's very important to make sure that it is actually a CPC what we are reporting and not anything else other than CPC.
Point taken very well.
So again, the importance of a detailed anatomical evaluation of the head, as we discussed, that should be done.
So we go on to our next case, and single umbilical artery. So Dr. Megha, what counseling as an obstetrician, as a fetal medicine, you will tell them? A patient with a single umbilical artery.
With single umbilical artery, we need to see that the detailed anatomy of the baby has been done. And if everything is normal, isolated single umbilical artery, of course, will have good prognosis. And it itself is not a marker for aneuploidy. But we need to definitely have, because single umbilical artery is associated with the high incidence of genitourinary abnormalities. So we need to have detailed scan. And if scan is normal, aneuploidy testing has been done, then we can reassure the couple that it should not be an issue, we need to have serial scans, and we need to see the growth of the baby in future scans also.
So basically association is with renal, cardiac, and also the growth of the baby needs to be seen. So again, one patient has been sent to me for a kind of isolated single umbilical artery. So there is in association some pelvic tests. The kidneys were looking very close to each other, and so there was a fused kidney, and on cardiac there was a VSD. So Dr. Megha, you said that single umbilical artery, look at the kidneys and look at the heart. So now what test will you send for? She has no screening done, so whether...
In this case, she needs invasive testing.
I'll take that.
Here she needs invasive testing, and we need to have the detailed genetic workup of the baby.
Yes.
Amniocentesis should be offered
The
to her.
pelvic test was 3 mm. So is 3 mm okay for a 16-weeker, or
It's
that
okay.
cutoff of
Yeah.
4 millimeter
It's okay.
has to be
3
there?
mm is okay, quite normal
So
for this baby.
radiologist, anybody, 3 mm at 16 weeks is pelvic test, or is it normal?
I just say prominent but normal,
Prominent.
and keep an eye on it. I mean,
You'll keep an eye
you
on
don't
it.
see, it's just
Yes.
that the cutoff is 4.
So
you
the
can't
cutoff
call it
is 4, but it is prominent for a
prominent but
16
normal.
weeks.
Yeah.
Yes, and they were fused kidneys. So yes, it also came out as trisomy 18, although we started off single umbilical artery. So just showing you that single umbilical artery, if everything normal, you don't worry about it and follow them up for IUGR, but you need to see the cardiac and renal. But if there is an abnormality, then test the baby. Then no screening, no NIPT, because these are more associated with trisomy 18 again and not with 21. Sir. You want to take? Take.
So, okay, sir, usually we don't see, many times we have come across the, in anomaly scan, we do see cysts which are more than 10 millimeters in size at the time of the anomaly scan. We had cases where it was like 15 into 10 millimeters and all. But all 3-4 cases which I have seen in last 5 to 6 years, they regressed in size over the time period when they were isolated. None of the cases I have come across in which I have seen like it was initially 6 mm, then at 24 it has become 8 mm, and then later it has become 10 millimeters. So there was not an increasing trend if it was a choroid plexus cyst. The reason, yeah.
So the CP cyst, you don't follow the size. Once you see a CP cyst, it is there. You look for all whatever has to be looked at. Then they will regress. If it is increasing, it is something else.
Yes.
It is not CP cyst, it could be a ganglionic cyst, it could be some kind of other cyst. Increasing, think of other things. Anyone has any interhemispheric cyst or a hemorrhage or something is there?
Yeah, okay, so now coming to the ultrasound findings, the first one is the Mickey Mouse sign, which we see on the 2D ultrasonography, wherein these are the 2 umbilical arteries and a single umbilical vein. And when we have a single umbilical artery, we will have only 2 anechoic points. So one is the umbilical artery and another is the umbilical vein, which is also called as the signet ring sign. And here we have one case where it was a twin pregnancy. Here this is the membrane, and one of the 2 fetuses had the single umbilical artery, while we can see the other fetus had a 3-vessel cord. So how do we see on color imaging? Around the bladder we should be seeing the 2 umbilical artery which are arising, coming out, and whenever it is a single umbilical artery, we will have only the one-sided umbilical artery which is there. So the same thing, a single umbilical artery at the anomaly scan, what next should be done? We have to go through the images again, go through our scan again. If cardiac views are adequately visualized and we are satisfied that they are normal, fetal echo is not warranted, But yes, if there is a slightest component of doubt about any of the views, we should have echo. Isolated single umbilical artery, no additional evaluation for an aneuploidy is needed, absolutely nothing from the invasive point of view. Suggested, yes, to follow up imaging, third trimester ultrasound for the evaluation of the growth, postnatal complete clinical evaluation by pediatrician to rule out the occult anomalies, as we know that they may be associated with the genitourinary tract anomalies.
Just one. So for single umbilical artery, one of those places where we try and look at the perianal muscle
Perianal muscular complex,
so on scan,
at
usually
growth
we
scan,
don't,
yes,
yeah.
we should.
So we specifically say upper and lower GI abnormalities rule out after birth.
Yes, so the
especially
target
add that
scan.
line for a single umbilical.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So Dr. Vaibhav, yes. So we have echogenic bowel. So how echogenic is echogenic bowel when we have to report it?
Generally, ma'am, echogenic bowels, echogenesis should be compared with bones. If they are as echogenic as bones, then you can call them as echogenic bowels.
Earlier we used to say grade 1, 2, 3. Do we report them in grading?
Concern, I think they have written either you compare with the fetal liver or you compare with the bones. You can,
So basically,
if they,
mic close.
if they are echogenic as compared the same echogenicity with the bone, then we call them as echogenic bowels.
So now grade 1 and grade 2 are not so reported. It is just called echogenic when it is as echogenic as the bone. Yeah. And then only the implications for echogenic bowels. So what does an echogenic bowel imply when you report it?
It can be secondary to some sort of CMV infections, amniotic hemorrhages, or it can be a part of cystic fibrosis. There are multiple things, variants. It can be incidental also. So after some time it can go also.
So yes, as sir said, it can be associated with aneuploidy. The likelihood ratio is 1.6, so it's a little borderline, but more association with viral infections, and if patient has had a bleed in the last previous 1 month also, the bowel will become echogenic because the baby can drink that and cause echogenicity. Yes, associated with IUGR and cystic fibrosis also that we have. So this patient was last week seen by us. She came with this dilated bowel loops at around 21 weeks of gestation. 30-year-old G2P1, and there was this echogenic bowel loop. So we looked for additional findings, and we found that there was an absent gallbladder. Gallbladder was not seen. So now what is the implication of echogenic bowel with
Ma'am, we have already discussing cystic fibrosis, so it can be a part of that.
So do I test for cystic fibrosis in this patient?
What is the gestational age right now? This is.
She's 21 weeks. We have time.
And was she investigated previously for the
Screening done, screening low risk.
Screening low risk. Probably we have only option of going for invasive.
Yeah. So Raviraj, we are back to you now. This patient has got echogenic bowel. There is a dilated bowel loop. She is a well-to-do, actually again a doctor, and she wants to know, do I do amniocentesis or can I just leave it? Gallbladder तो कभी-कभी दिखता नहीं वैसे भी. So absence of gallbladder is significant?
Yes, ma'am. In this case, there are multiple findings. Apart from echogenic bowel, there is absent gallbladder and dilated loop of small bowels. So it points towards the something syndromic or something. So it's genetic etiology. So in this case, I definitely will advise amniocentesis. And
what test will you send for?
In this case, I definitely will, apart from ruling out common aneuploidies, I will go for exome in this case.
So, sir, geneticist, sir, what all do you want to send?
In this case, both chromosomal microarray and the exome sequencing,
Both
clinical
of them.
exome sequencing. Both
Patient will want both to be done, or can only exome help us and leave the microarray or do microarray?
No, both should be advised in this. At 21 weeks it is.
Yes.
So like for cystic fibrosis, is there any MS-MLPA test which includes this CFTR?
Right now we don't have.
Okay.
In prenatal we don't.
So like rather than going for an exome,
direct testing.
Okay.
Yes, so here we did both. We did a microarray which was normal. We also did a torch PCR because echogenic bowel, you need to rule out infections also. and yes, it came out as CFTR, cystic fibrosis, homozygous. वहाँ से
In
हो
such
रहा है.
cases, particularly you will get the history of consanguinity. So taking the family history and the detailed pedigree analysis would be definitely helpful in such cases when we have the ecogenic.
So although in Indian population cystic fibrosis is not very common, but if you see things like that, then probably exome. So only exome is going to pick up cystic fibrosis.
Yes.
No? So your routine ecogenic bowel without this gallbladder, what would you have done, Dr. Megha? Without the gallbladder. Microarray and torch maybe. So this was an eye opener. Sir, Saket, you.
So now most of the labs are doing a whole exome along with CNVs. So you don't need to order chromosomal microarrays separately, because that reduces the cost to a great extent, because we are also doing a torch in this, so it will be too expensive for the couple. So a whole exome with CNVs and a torch would be an ideal.
That is still, yes, in the pipeline, maybe geneticists can say we can do that.
That's
yes. So.
So about ecogenic bowel, the etiopathogenesis, it is associated with wide range of pathological conditions, as we discussed, with the first one being aneuploidy, cystic fibrosis, we had one case, congenital viral infections, one case madam discussed in the morning, the CMV case, and then the primary GI pathology in the fetus, intraamniotic bleeding and with subsequent fetal swallowing, and fetal growth restriction. So these are the etiologies which are associated with ecogenic fetal bowel. And if it's isolated, truly isolated ecogenic bowel at anomaly scan, a thorough history regarding the viral illness in the past few weeks to rule out our fetal infections, maternal fetal infection, then the history of first trimester bleeding. On scan, we have to relook for the subtle anomalies and the growth restrictions to rule out infections again. Torch titers, the IgG and IgM titers for viral infections. For aneuploidies, if first trimester screening test is negative, no further testing is needed for the isolated ecogenic bowel. However, if there is no previous test done, then counseling regarding probability of trisomy 21, that's Down syndrome, and option for NIPS should be given, because we saw in the first slide that the likelihood ratio is of 1.6. So yeah, if no screening test, then the options of screening test at least at this point should be given to the couple.
Sir, one more point I would like to add. Yes. Many times the patient is referred for ecogenic bowel, but they are actually not ecogenic. Many times harmonics are not turned off. Probes are high frequency. Nowadays, many people are using C2-9. So low frequency probe and harmonics should be turned off while assessing the ecogenic bowel.
Yes, one very good point you have brought out. When we were studying at Mediscan Chennai, one important point that Dr. Sudarshan always used to say is you are not going to report ecogenic bowel ever by the transvaginal scan whenever you are doing, because it's a high frequency probe. Whatever you look in the gut will look ecogenic, so never report bowel as ecogenic one if you are doing a scan by the TVS route. So high frequency probes will give us the images which will appear as ecogenic bowel. So we should not do that.
So how do you circumvent that, Manoj? You will reduce the gain and see? Yes. So you reduce it to maximum lower, and then if the bowel is still ecogenic. So we go on to nuchal fold thickness. This is different from nuchal translucency, which we see in 11 to 13 plus 6 weeks. This is done after 16 weeks, and the measurement is 6 millimeter. It's not according to the weeks of gestation. And any time nuchal fold more than 6 millimeter is significant and a strong likelihood ratio for Down syndrome. So with that, Pooja, we go to this case. She is a primary gravida, 32-year-old. NT was 99 centile. So she got an NIPT done somewhere and it came as high risk. By the time the NIPT came, she was now 16 weeks and has come to you for what can I do? Am I okay with an NIPT report? There is an increased nuchal fold thickness. There is a hypoplastic nasal bone. Cardiac also, one side was little smaller than the other.
Ma'am, in this case, we should go for invasive testing as NT is more than 99 centile at the time of NT scan, and NFT is also increased. And there are other markers also. So definitive test we have to do.
No, but I have an NIPT and it is Downs. Can I just terminate on grounds of
No,
NIPT?
ma'am. No, on NIPT we can't terminate. We should not terminate. It is a screening test.
So what test will you send for her?
In amnio, QFPCR and microarray.
So here maybe NIPT is 21.
Yes.
So will you want to first look at the QFPCR
Yes,
and
ma'am.
then decide karyotype or micro?
whether to do karyotype or microarray.
So this is a good thing that here the NIPT is saying it is trisomy 21. So you don't have to waste money on a microarray. You first do a FISH and QFPCR, and if it comes out as positive, then you can just do a routine karyotype and not waste money on the microarray. Plus, it will also tell you the recurrence risk because the type of trisomy also can be told in this. So I think here the message is when there's an increased NT, don't waste money on an NIPT. Do an invasive testing. It would have told you in early gestation itself that it was Downs, and patient would not have gone through 2 procedures and ended up late termination. So I come back to Dr. Manoj. Having said nuchal fold is a significant likelihood ratio for Down syndrome, this patient, 32-year-old, primary gravida, nuchal fold was almost 7 millimeter. There was some pelvic tests also. No screen has been done. So what will you want to do? Screen her or NIPT or invasive? Nuchal fold and pelvic tests. Strong soft marker, nuchal fold of 7 millimeter.
Yes, Chalu. So considering the 2 soft markers, she will fall in the high risk. So I would like to offer invasive testing for her.
So what test will you want to send? Here.
Nuchal fold thickness has very wide ranges of causes. So primarily QFPCR or FISH. And depending on that, then I would, if the microarray are also negative, then I would like to extend for exome also.
So nuchal fold can be Downs, but it could be a lot of other things also. So, sir, as a geneticist, what else will you, if there's a nasal bone good, cardiac is good, probably there is not Downs, maybe something else. So what will you test?
Yeah, for Down syndrome, definitely we'll do the testing, but apart from that, the detailed sonography would be required.
No, detail done. Detail is this only. Everything else okay except a nuchal fold and a pelvic test.
Right. So in this case, because there are 2 markers, definitely we'll go for the karyotyping to look for any other chromosomal abnormalities apart from the aneuploidies too.
So all that is normal. Do I do microarray plus exome?
Microarray would be required.
Yes. So nuchal fold, the first one was Downs because NIPT was positive and there were markers. Here there was 2 markers, but karyotype was normal, microarray is okay, exome is okay, torch PCR is also okay. I work in a place where they are ready to do everything. So I've got everything done for her. She says, can we continue? Can you completely reassure me? Or maybe Omkar can take it now.
These all factories of test come negative, then also we cannot assure them 100% because pregnancy is a journey, we have to follow it. So
Doctor,
most
you
likely,
got 1 lakh test done, 1 lakh worth, and you're saying still not accurate.
counseling is important.
Yes. Yes, but what will you do now? Follow her for what?
We'll follow up to look for any evolving structural abnormalities.
So yes, this pre-test counseling is required before you put in a needle inside, that it could come out as abnormal, but if it comes as normal, it is still not 100% in spite of doing all the tests, and monitor her for growth as well as to look for hydrops also. So this is this same patient, 24 weeks, nuchal fold increased more, nasal bone was okay, and she had a section 3.5 kg, 1 year old. She sent me this picture saying everything is normal, doctor, you said maybe there is something. I was right in deciding what I did. You want to add something?
Please finish your...
Yes, finished.
So, especially in cases with NT more than the 99th centile, there are still chances of an unexplained neurodevelopmental delay even if all the tests come out to be normal. which can be picked up later at age, not even in gestation, at a later age. So yeah, 1 year is too early to celebrate on that.
Yes. Yes, but I think if you've done all the tests, then the counseling still needs to have that small point that there could be something which you have to understand. Otherwise, you decide what you want to do.
In such cases, mosaicism is a possibility which can be actually we can skip that during the testing. So mosaicism is one possibility still in this baby. That she is born, she seems to be normal. Mosaicism, sex chromosomal abnormalities particularly.
So we've done a karyotype, no, sir?
Fish we would have.
We've done a karyotype also.
It need not pick up all the
And the
mosaic,
fish also we
mosaicisms.
had done. Fish will pick up mosaic, no, sir?
Fish will pick up, yeah.
Yes.
So fish also done.
Fish. So do we have, this can be taken by anyone, do we have a scenario wherein the NT was normal, but then at anomaly scan we get increased nuchal fold thickness, and means the couple had undergone first trimester screening, and does the scenario change? Means if the NT was normal, now suddenly the NFT is increased, you have taken the measurements well, there is no oligo, it is not in a breech position, wherein sometimes breech position, the fetus, you get the NFT which is a little, bigger or higher in the... It is good, it's a good...
Done by all of you.
Taking that question at face value, for me it's scarier. I mean, because now you're probably looking at something which is not Down syndrome. Which, like, especially, like, I think Noonan's, like, especially if there is a persistently increased nuchal fold thickness, you have to test for Noonan's. Skeletal dysplasia scan pe something which Noonan's we don't need.
Noonan's is something which may not have anything except nuchal fold. Earlier we used to do Noonan panel, but now a whole exome will be able to pick up Noonan of every kind. So it has made us a little easier. So
after this lengthy discussion on the thickened nuchal fold, it was one of the first identified ultrasound markers of trisomy 21 and still one of the most specific markers till date. And how do we define it? It's the thickened nuchal fold as more than 6 millimeters between 15 to 20 weeks of gestation. And the positive likelihood ratio is huge. It's between 11 to 23, suggesting a substantial risk for trisomy 21 for increased NFT. Now, what's more important is that we take the measurements accurately on the scan, as we just discussed. One may have a suspicion that this is an increased nuchal fold thickness, but we have to measure it in the proper planes as the guidelines say, and then accordingly we have to measure it from the outer to outer, and the cutoff is 6 millimeters from 15 to 20 weeks. So when it is increased, as we discussed, if no aneuploidy screening test has been done previously, then counsel them about the possibility of trisomy 21, and a discussion of options for NIPS or amniocentesis should be made. No quadruple marker testing for increased NFT, as we said that the risk is substantial in these cases, as it is a major marker for trisomy 21. If the fetus is euploid, serial scans for the evaluation should be done. It's not indicated. It is actually indicated, and we do look for the Noonan and other things what we just discussed. And if cardiac anatomy is adequately looked for, and if it is normal, then one may skip the echo part.
So we go on to our next case, and Ankur, you can take this. What are the implications of hypoplastic nasal bone, and how do you define a hypoplastic nasal bone?
Generally now we don't use the term as hypoplastic nasal bone. It is either absent nasal bone or present nasal bone. So
second trimester.
Yeah. So and it's a very powerful soft marker for Downs with a very high likelihood ratio. So if we see on scan, maybe in first trimester that there is a absent nasal bone, then we should first go for a double marker and see, including the nasal bone absent, if the risk is in a low risk range, then we can counsel the patient and follow up again to do a more detailed evaluation scan. And if the risk comes in a high risk range, then we can go for an invasive testing.
Achha,
Ma'am, can I just felicitate Dr. Raviraj sir? He has a strain.
Yes. Thank you.
I just want to thanks Dr. Foxy and Obstetrics and Gynecology Community Solapur for giving me this opportunity to attend this wonderful academic feast. And thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you, Ravi Raj sir, for accepting our invitation at the last moment, and it was nice to have you here on both the days. Thank you very much, sir.
Viraj has been my student, as well as he's done a fetal medicine full 3 years course in Mediscan and is an excellent fetal medicine specialist. So we go ahead with that. So Shetal, hypoplastic nasal bone, unossified nasal bone, absent nasal bone, how do you define all of them? And are they all having the same implication?
So, unossified or absent is one and the same. Basically, there's a cartilage in which if there is no calcium deposition, we don't see the white bone. So either unossified or absent, it means there's no calcium deposition. Hypoplastic means that the length is less than 5th centile for that particular gestation. Absent or unossified is what we see in the first trimester. We usually do not go to measure the nasal bone length and say if it's hypoplastic or not. Hypoplastic would be a second trimester marker where we measure the length and compare it for the centiles for that particular period of gestation. As far as their implications in aneuploidy are concerned, the likelihood ratio is the same. Whether it is hypoplastic, unossified, unilateral hypoplastic, unilateral unossified, anything is under one umbrella. We treat it as a soft marker for trisomy 21 with a high likelihood ratio, and we proceed in a stepwise fashion depending upon what's been done and what are their findings. And
yeah, so definitely hypoplastic, absent, unossified. Unossified and absent are the same thing. Some report it as unossified and some as absent. And hypoplastic or unilateral, one side, other side, all have the same implication, and the likelihood ratio is significant, about 6.5. But in Indian population, this is quite common, and we have our own Indian centiles also for these, so which are different from world nasal bone sizes. And in our country, the ethnicity, we have a lot of these absent nasal bones which are present. So the likelihood may be not as much as what it is there in the world literature. So, Saket, Vaibhav sir, we have this patient who's got a 17 weeks absent nasal bone. She is a primary, 27 years, 17 weeks isolated absent. Will you do a NIPT or diagnostic or do a quadruple now?
Ma'am, FTS was absolutely normal?
Nothing done.
Nothing
Patient
done.
just
It's come only for the absent nasal bone. Sometimes
yes.
we have an option of going for,
yes,
I think invasive only.
So some would want to do an NIPT also, but mostly I think absent nasal bone, the likelihood ratio is so high that maybe an amniocentesis is worth doing.
Plus, in this case, we don't know what the first trimester situation was. Yes. We don't know if the NT was more than 99 or what. We've not seen it. So, especially when there's nothing in the first trimester, probably invasive is.
Yes, so our own data, which we have published, part of a procedure, 22% of absent nasal bone in Indian population also had Down syndrome, but 3 out of these 4 had associated anomalies. So it is very important with an absent nasal bone again to look for other structural markers, and here again this is trisomy 21. So Saket, you can take it now. Same thing, it's an absent nasal bone, but on cardiac I am seeing a single valve. So is the counseling going to be different in this or the same as the isolated absent nasal
bone? So first of all, isolated absent nasal bone, I would have personally advised an invasive test directly rather than any screening test. So any chromosomal, numerical or CNV will be picked up in a microarray. And isolated absent nasal bones can be associated with microduplications, especially 21p microduplication. So
But here
of course,
AVST.
Sorry?
Here
Here
AVST
there is an
there.
AVSD, so this is a very strong marker for a chromosomal abnormality. So definitely an invasive with a chromosomal microarray is the option for this.
And for termination afterwards, no? For an AVST?
Yes, I mean, this will have a guarded prognosis. This baby will require multiple stage surgeries after birth, the prognosis of which is not known. So, of course, we leave that decision up to the couple, how extensively they want to go if the chromosome, provided the chromosomes and genes are normal. I mean, the chromosomes are normal at least.
Yes.
So yes, absent nasal bone or unossified nasal bone has got significant positive likelihood ratio, and when it's truly isolated, ethnic variations are known to occur. If no aneuploidy screening test was done previously, then as we have discussed, we should give them an option of amniocentesis or at least an NIPS for trisomy 21. And if the fetus is euploid, serial scan only to look for the nasal bone ossification are per se not needed. Now moving on to the next marker, aberrant right subclavian artery.
So the nasal bone is not associated with any deformity. So it's not an absent nose, it is just a nasal bone which is missing, and it has no cosmetic implication. So you wanted to say?
Yeah, follow-up sonography for the skeletal issues should be done in such cases because absent nasal bone is seen in number of multiple dysplasias, skeletal dysplasias.
Yes.
So sonography follow-ups.
So that brings about is if there is an absent nasal bone, should we do microarray? Or just karyotype is enough?
Karyotyping is enough, but we should follow definitely, microarray will not pick up the skeletal dysplasias.
Skeletal,
We need
yes.
so detailed family history is necessary and follow up with the scans, and then if we see there is some discrepancy in the bones, definitely we can go for the exam sequence.
So then DNA should be saved in these cases,
yes,
maybe.
yes.
So we have the next, which is a aberrant right subclavian artery associated with trisomy 21, significant history along with 22q microdeletion. So Dr. Megha, primi gravida, how do you see ARSA, and do you routinely see ARSA in your anomaly scan, and how do you define it, and what implications?
Yeah, it should be seen in cardiac evaluation. Especially, we'll be able to pick it up in 3-vessel trachea view, where a vessel going to the right side of the right shoulder will be seen, and it will be like a tail to that V, and it should be behind trachea. We need to document trachea in front of that vessel, and if possible, you can just have the pulse wave Doppler also for documentation. And it has got very high association with aneuploidies, and these patients definitely will need invasive testing.
So you will send for what? Fish and microarray?
Yeah,
fish
and
and karyotype? Fish and microarray. Because here we are also slightly worried about 22q deletion, and so an amniocentesis for karyotype plus 22q, or you would do a microarray, take care of both the things. So here both the things are normal. So now Megha, will you tell the parents that everything good and we don't need to do anything? Will she have some cardiac problems at birth, or whether
No, these babies will have recurrent upper respiratory tract infections, and we can inform our pediatrician beforehand that this baby is having ARSA. Otherwise, postnatal echo, I don't think it's needed because we have done thorough echo prenatally. So we're not going to pick up anything extra after the birth.
Anybody, Omkar, anybody?
Postnatal major morbidity because of this ARSA. Of course, we cannot assure them 100%, but 99% definitely they will not require anything. And in most postnatal echo also, sometimes ARSA is not picked up, which is as good as picked up antenatally. So sometimes they say, आपने तो डॉक्टर ARSA बोला था, बाद में तो है ही नहीं रिपोर्ट में. So this happens.
Actually, the fetal medicine are better echo specialists than the pediatrician cardiologists. So we all have become better in fetal echo rather than the pediatricians doing cardiac echo.
Except we always miss the finding of a PDA, which the patient comes with the report कि PDA दिया आपने नहीं दिया था.
So, before I go to this slide, let's see what exactly is the aberrant right subclavian artery, because when I was an obstetrician, I didn't know a word about ARSA. So, everything about URSA I have learned during the fetal medicine course. So this is the normal aortic arch wherein we have the 3 neck vessels. The first one is the brachiocephalic artery, which divides into the right subclavian and the right common carotid. The second branch is the left common carotid, and the third one is the left subclavian. So the vessel which we are discussing is this one, the right subclavian artery, which should arise from the brachiocephalic artery. That is the first branch of the arch of aorta. Now, what happens in the normal variant, or what happens when we have an aberrant course of this vessel, as per one theory called the Edward theory, rather than arising from this vessel, the first vessels, the right subclavian artery arises as the fourth vessel of the aortic arch, goes or courses behind the trachea and comes all the way towards the right upper limb. So that course is called the aberrant course of the right subclavian artery. This on scan is seen like this. This is the this whole thing, this one line, this blue line is the aortic arch. Now, usually it should come from the first or of the uppermost tip of the aortic arch and go towards the right side. Then it is called the normal course, wherein here we can see when there is an aberrant course, it is coming from the tail of this V. So, and this is the trachea. So, whenever it is behind the trachea and it is going like a tail towards the right side, then it is called the aberrant course of the right subclavian artery. Frankly speaking, whenever we take a 3-vessel trachea view, and if it is an aberrant right subclavian course, it is picked up better or easily as compared to the normal right subclavian artery course. So for aneuploidy, if first trimester screening test is negative, then no further testing is needed. But yeah, if nothing has been done previously, then NIPS or quadruple marker test or amnio should be offered to the couple.
So we do our last case, short long bones. Yeah. So Dr. Vaibhav, how short humerus is short and how short femur is called as short femur?
Generally, it should be less than 5th centile of the body parameters. Then we call it short. Then when you find them, you need to compare with the rest of the body parameters. And if they're really small, then you call it short.
So what else will you look at when you see a short femur and humerus?
You need to do total survey of the fetus. You need to see at the thorax, you need to see at the skull bones. And if you find hypoplastic thorax, then you may call it lethal skeletal dysplasia, something like that. You have to do detailed evaluation of the fetus.
So you look for Downs, you look for skeletal, and you look for IUGR.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
first, we have to
when
look for
we
parents'
encounter
height.
short femur, I would first see the height of the patient, see the height of the family members.
Familial thing.
Yeah.
yes. So parents have to be also look for constitutional small. So Pooja, we have this patient, she's a doctor, Gravida 3 para 2, 1 live but 1 neonatal death, and now she had a good NT dual marker, anomaly was normal, and at 29 weeks all the bones were short and thick. So what do you think, is it aneuploidy or it is something else?
It should be something else because all the bones are short, and which you see for the thoracic circumference.
So we will look at the rest of the baby, and the femur was so short, bone is seen, the thorax is small, and it is bell-shaped. So looks like a lethal skeletal dysplasia. So
skeletal dysplasia will manifest usually in the 3rd trimester. Aneuploidy usually have more signs in the 1st or 2nd trimester. So we are definitely not dealing with any aneuploidy.
So what will you do now at 29-30 weeks with this kind of a baby? She's a gynecologist, mother is also a gynecologist.
To know the cause or type of the skeletal dysplasia, the SD panel, invasive testing.
We'll do a test. So
Yes,
even at 29 weeks, we will do a test?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So yes, we thought of doing a test, but that was a time when terminations were not allowed before the MTP Act. So she said we will continue as it is, but we will evaluate this baby after birth. So a section was done because it was breech and a previous cesarean section, and we sent for a postnatal assessment. So this is the child which is born. So maybe the geneticist can take this. That baby had gum hypertrophy, badly dysmorphic faces. There was the thick skin, low set ears, short thighs and legs. So antenatal amnio would have been better, or now I can see better in this baby?
No, even antenatally by doing the testing, we could not have done anything. So postnatal evaluation is what was the right thing in this case. It seems to be skeletal dysplasia. It also shows the tire-like appearance. There is a specific syndrome. Yeah. So evaluation of this baby by doing the whole exome sequencing is required.
So we did an infantogram also, which also showed that thick tire appeared thighs. So do not resuscitate was the decision made, and we sent for testing, and it came out as mucolipidosis. So it was thought of skeletal to start with, and it came out as a homozygous autosomal recessive. Mucolipidosis also presents like this, thick skin and short bones, and those bones were thick and echogenic when to start with. So this was the disorder, and this was next pregnancy. What is the recurrence risk? Sir, you can only take it.
This will be 25%.
So homozygous.
Recurrence risk will be 25% since this is autosomal recessive. So we can explain them everything about, and we can definitely prevent that by doing the prenatal testing in subsequent pregnancies.
So we've covered almost all our soft markers. So quadruple marker is an effective screening for Downs. The presence of sonographic markers increase the risk, but their likelihood ratio can be utilized to adjust the Downs risk. Absence of all markers will reduce the risk by 8-fold. So if there are no markers, whatever your risk is, it reduces by more 8 times less than that. And post-test odds are important. Most isolated markers do not modify the risk, but the ones which are very important are ventriculomegaly, nuchal fold, hypoplastic nasal bone, and ARSA. For all others, look for the rest of the baby. The whole panel today was on, when you see one marker, look for other things, look for other markers, structural abnormalities, FGR, and everything associated, and then decide what needs to be done. Milder markers, aneuploidy screen stays because the likelihood ratio not very high. Strong markers, only one marker also is enough for testing. So for hypoplastic nasal bone, ARSA, nuchal fold thickness, ventriculomegaly, even with one marker, the likelihood ratio is so enough that we need to do an amniocentesis. You want to add?
So we conclude the panel with this. I would like to thank all our panelists and moderator Vandana Madam
And the
for
audience
beautiful
for
this thing.
sitting for so
and
long.
yes, the audience for patient listening. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Sumit sir and Vandana ma'am, for moderating this excellent panel. It's just one request, all the take-home messages of the soft markers, if you could share with all the delegates.
We'll
Because-
send it to you.
Yes, ma'am. We would like to felicitate our panelists for today. We start with Dr. Omkar Poddar, sir. Vandana ma'am, Sumit sir, please felicitate. I request Milinsha sir and Ghate madam to please join us. Dr. Chandrakant Jadhav, please come close to the stage. I request Dr. Manoj Jadhav, sir, next. Dr. Vaibhav Meru, sir.
मैडम आप ही जाओ ना प्लीज आप आओ ना
We have Dr. Megha Kamla. Dr. Megha Kamlapur, madam. Dr. Saket Thakar. Dr. Shetal Mehta. Dr. Pooja Pable. Dr. Ankur Shah. Dr. Dhyandev Chopre, sir. Our moderators for today, Dr. Vandana Bansal, madam. Dr. Sumit Chamaria, sir. Now I request all the panelists to please come in for a group photograph of the panel. Sir. Okay. I request Dr. Dabde sir and Dr. Rohini Deshpande madam and Dr. Vidya Tirankar ma'am to join us on the stage for the felicitation. I request Dr. Chandrakant to please announce the names of all the pharmaceutical divisions who have been a partner to us in this conference. We extremely value your support for this academic event, and in a token of appreciation, we would like to appreciate you all. We have Mr. Nitin Kolapure and Dr. Venkatesh Manga from HBC Life Sciences. Rohini ma'am, can we have you on the stage, please? Rohini ma'am. Yeah. Mr. Nitin Kolapure and Mr. Venkatesh Manga. Then we have Alembic Pharmaceuticals, Mr. Ritesh, Mr. Nagnath, Mr. Shivraj, Mr. Rishikesh and Venkatesh Vadnath. Alembic Pharmaceuticals, please come back.
नहीं नहीं मैडम नहीं ना
QRS Healthcare. QRS Healthcare, Mr. Zubair and Mr. Sohail Sheikh. Then we have Sun Pharma, Mr. Sunil Pogul and Vijay Jadhav. After Sun Pharma, we have Mr. Aniket, Mr. Sakesh Patel, Mrs. Rubis Rushali and Yukta Wankhade from Mindray. नहीं लिखा है Can I have Krishna and his team from GE? फोटो काढते ना फोटो दूसरा. सगळेच हवं नाही का? Then you have Mr. Ashutosh Kharat from Innovate. Anybody from Samsung? Samsung, नाम लिख के दो ना please. है क्या पीछे लिखा हुआ? Okay, sir. Can we have Mr. Kiran Sakre and Dinesh Kulkarni from Samsung? Then we have Ms. Hemlata and Mr. Dinesh from Sai Enterprises, Nagpur. Then we have Mr. Omkar Jaipurkar from Care Inex Innovation Private Limited. Is anybody around from Oosphere? This, there's anybody from Oosphere? Yeah. Okay. To conclude, no conference is successful without technical support. So can I have we start with our photographer, Mr. Anil Shah first. Then we have Aivade. Aivade, please come on the stage. थोडं पळत ये. घरी जायचं सगळ्यांना. Aivade sir, the technical team. Aivade sir, the technical team with Samendra also after the Aivade. अरे माझं कशा माझं नाही घडलंय अजून वेळ आहे ती रोजिटा आणि महेशला. Samendra, please come with your team fast. Mahesh कुठे आहे? रोजिटा, महेश. Now I would like to call Ms. Rosetta from Rosetta Events, who has been the backbone of communication and this event. Yes. I would also request Mr. Mahesh to join her if he's around. The entire team, please. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Monica.
Three cheers. Hip hip. Hip hip. Thank you for all the online delegates for joining us today at Onference. And thank you, Mr. Rahul Agarwal from the team Onference for being there. Yes, sir.
ये ना
है ना सर?
ये अरे ये
Can I request somebody from Team Balaji Sarovar to please come up for the felicitation? Mohitosh, please come up. Sir, Balaji chi trophy raile.
Good job done, Monica.
Thank you, sir. Mohitosh, please come on behalf of Balaji. Madam, thamba na. Another important announcement, if you have seen an iPhone which is on silent mode belonging to Dr. Meena Gujjotikar madam, please see. Can I take official permission from you, sir, to declare that the conference is over now?
Oh, teamwork. Chandrakant, thank you very much.